Cinema Worms.
Discussing everything from Grima Wormtongue to the Shy Halib.
Cinema Worms.
Discussing everything from Grima Wormtongue to the Shy Halib.
I'm Sabib.
And I'm Linz.
And this is Cinema Worms Podcast.
Today I'll be talking about Pillion, which I saw on my own in the cinema. It was a little more crowded than I would have expected to be at that time for that kind of film. But good clientele, we all had a good time. So I'm going to talk about it now, and we'll get into some of the ratings aspects in a second. So Pillion was directed by Harry Leighton. This is his directorial feature-length debut, and it was written by Leighton and Adam Mars Jones. Now, it's an adaptation of Mars Jones's 2020 novel Box Hill, which was a Fitzcarraldo edition. You recognise them from the blue covers. Very classic, very iconic. Box Hill is a coming-of-age story between a young man and a leather-clad biker that he meets at this biker hangout in 1975. Now, Pillion, the film, brings this up to modern day, which is really nice. I'm not sure how much of that was the director's active choice, or the film industry's just general hatred of anything they consider quote-unquote period drama, aka anything before 2010. So before we get to the actual plot, you might be wondering, what is a pillion? You've probably seen the word, maybe you don't know what it is. According to the internet, which is the only source of information, a pillion is a secondary pad, cushion or seat behind the main seat or saddle on a motorbike or moped. And a passenger in the seat is said to ride pillion, so riding behind somebody who's the main driver. The word is actually derived from the Scottish Gaelic for little rug, pillion. Shout out to Scottish Gaelic there. From the Latin pellis, animal skin. Oh, you lucky listener, you came for Skarsgård abs and weird alley sex, but you've learned an educational fact along the way. How fun for you! Pillion stars Harry Melling, who we will know from various things, including The Queen's Gambit and, of course, the series that we do not speak its name. He plays lonely, awkward traffic warden Colin, who spends his days singing in a barbershop quartet in a local pub, and also being yelled at by irate members of the public after he tickets their cars. But one night his life changes when handsome biker Prince Ray, played by a stoic and sort of Steve McQueen-esque Alexander Skarsgård, who you'll recognise from a bazillion things, but who I think I last saw maybe in Infinity Pool. And Ray decides that Colin, cutesy little Colin, might make a good plaything for him. And thus begins an unconventional, BDSM relationship. It's a bit light on the actual BDSM, but it does feature a fair bit of on-screen graphic sex, including what I will call portions of Shaft. It's certainly not, it's enough for me to recommend not watching it after Christmas dinner with your parents or elderly relations in the room, unless they're the appreciatively kink-positive sort and not easily shocked. That being said, this is not 50 Shades of biker fucking. For one thing, both parties here can act. Subtle shade thrown. And for another, the contrast between stern, taciturn Dom Ray and hapless but enthusiastic, puppyish sub Colin is both funny and adorable. It's been a while since I Leslie Sharp, who plays Colin's terminally ill mother in anything, but if you're British or you have a fondness for raunchy British comedies of the 90s, you may remember her as Jean, Mark Addy's wife in 1997's The Full Monty. It's kind of incredible when I think about it how many amazing actors were in The Full Monty and then went on to do just blockbuster films. Now, I don't want to spoil anything for the actual plot of Pillion here. I feel like I've given you enough to kind of go on, whether you know you're going to like it or not. Although I would say go in and keep an open mind. But I will confess that I mouthed, "Is that Jake Bloody Shears?" at the screen halfway through. And yes, it was not on my bingo card to be watching the lead singer of the Scissor Sisters having his ass eaten like a summer picnic. But there you go. 2025 has been full of surprises. I actually spent the walk home wondering what puns I could make on about that on the podcast, but the best I could come up with was the Bareback Brothers, which is just woefully inadequate. And I welcome your own attempts at puns. If you're too young to know who the Scissor Sisters are, I apologize. You're a fetus. And for everyone else, their Wikipedia page is just a roller coaster. It contains a bunch of sentences that must be brand new to the English language, and you can spend a riveting few minutes there in your own time. But back to Pillion. It's a really interesting film. It's not the kind of film that I would have thought would have got kind of widespread release, but it's nice. It's edgy, but not necessarily for the sake of being edgy. The relationship at the core is really the heart of it, and it wouldn't work without Skarsgård and Melling being the kind of actors that they are, conveying these characters properly with a full gamut of emotions. My cat has just... Thank you, Dane, for your input, but I don't believe you've seen Pillion. So I would recommend seeing it, but as I said, go in knowing that there is a lot of reasonably graphic sex on. And if you can get through that and you're fine with that, then you're probably going to have a really good time for the rest of it. I confess, I even shed a tear at one point, which was not what I thought going into this. I thought it was just going to be a raunchy good time, but instead it made me feel feelings, and I'm not mad about it. So go and see Pillion. I highly recommend it. It's the one you've all presumably not been waiting for. It is my review of Christy, which I saw pretty much only because I have a Cineworld membership, and as such don't actually have to pay for films. I can see unlimited films every month. And I had decided to do a double bill this day with The Running Man, which is kind of funny in ways that I will now discuss. So firstly, Christy is a sports biopic directed by David Michaud, who is probably best known for 2010's crime thriller Animal Kingdom, which was like Australian. It was written by Michaud and actress-writer Mira Folks, who was also in Animal Kingdom. This is a boxing biopic about Christy Martin, who rose to fame after being spotted playing just really aggressive basketball as a young woman, and they call her, her nickname was the coal miner's daughter from West Virginia, because that's kind of what her family did. So let's get into this cast of characters first, and then we'll kind of talk about the parallels with some other stuff going on. So we've got Ben Foster, who has been in a ton of movies and also used to be married to Laura Prepon, as Zabib continually reminds me for some reason, is virtually unrecognizable as Jim Martin, who becomes Christy's manager and later her husband, with a huge, horrible age gap. She's like 22, he's 47. Christy's high school girlfriend, Rosie, the name is changed presumably to give like a thin layer of defense to her real life girlfriend, although the details are on the Wikipedia page, so I'm not really sure why they bothered. Played by Jessica Bohr, who's probably best known for being Kelly on later seasons of the US version of the TV show Shameless. Christy's horrible homophobic mother, Joyce, is played by Merritt Wever. Now, she's won an Emmy for being like a best supporting comedic actress. She's been in lots of things: Nurse Jackie, Godless, and Unbelievable, Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, New Girl, The Walking Dead, Severance. It's a hell of a filmography. Well done to Merritt Wever for making me hate her in this film. It was... If you've seen the trailer at all, and if you've been at the cinema lately, how could you have avoided it? Because they pushed this film so hard for so little, I guess. But one of the things I loved about the trailer is it gives us a really iconic moment from Merritt Wever, where she just sort of tilts her head and says, and I'm going to do my best impression of it here, "Oh, Christy, you sound crazy." It's just perfection. It ranks up there for me with "Oh, Barbara, What Did You Do?" from from the Wonder Woman sequel. It's just iconic lines that you can drop into any conversation. So essentially, Christy, who is played by Sydney Sweeney. Let's address this first before we get into the actual plot. Now, there is a controversy If you haven't seen the trailers of this film, perhaps you've seen the controversy going on social media. It is about eugenics. You see what I did there. If you don't see what I did there, then I guess you missed the controversy. The short version is American Eagle thought it would be a great idea to cast Sydney Sweeney in a Gene commercial, which she delivers in like a way that sort of makes me think she's been sedated. But it plays with the low hanging fruit of the human genes / denim jeans wordplay. It's just so original. No one's ever done that before. And maybe this would have gone largely unnoticed had it not been for casting Sydney Sweeney, who is very blonde and blue-eyed at a time where just Aryan fascism is on the rise again, and minorities are being noticeably oppressed for what they look like in the US. And her response hasn't really helped. Instead of seeming like sympathetic, she's just sort of smirked about it in interviews, which has angered former fans. Now, I liked Sweeney in 2023's Reality, where she played Reality Winner, a very improbably named intelligence leaker interrogated by the FBI. I could not find any joke to make about Levi's here, which wouldn't be fair to drag them into it anyway, but there is something to salvage from the wreckage. I am pretty proud of that one. It took a while to come up with. Now, essentially, we see it is quite by the numbers. We see Christy's rise to fame. You know, we see her being taken on by Jim. We see her going through like early bouts and only winning, even if it's winning like sometimes by kind of points. I don't really know enough about boxing, but it's pretty clear to me. We don't actually see her losing anything in the early stages, which is not true. You can tell from the Wikipedia, it's very clear, and from, I think she wrote a book, you know, she did lose like one or two of those early bouts, or on points, or, you know, from just general boxing losing, I don't know. But the film wants to create more of a meteoric rise for her, so that we can see more of a crash. I just think that, you know, the montage of just winning and winning, it doesn't really build a lot of tension, especially when you consider that something like that is, you know, we like to see an underdog training. You know, there's this joke about the training montage, you know, that has become popular from like, you know, these kind of, like Rocky, for example, always does a training montage. And there's something, you need to see them, you know, kind of fail or fall down a little bit and then pick themselves back up and do even more. That's kind of how we bond with the character, is seeing that they're not just winning all the time, that they're not perfect, you know, that everything's not going their way all the time. That's what we want to see as an audience. And we don't really get that here. So it's a little hard. Also, because of Christy, you know, we do feel sorry for her for repressing her sexuality and having to screw Jim, who is just disgusting, like in pretty much every way. But it is both a choice that she's making, and she's also projecting out her own insecurities. And you really see this with, so Katie O'Brien, who was also in the other film I saw that day, The Running Man, which ironically featured Glenn Powell in the starring role, and Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell were in one of the biggest kind of blockbusters of the summer last year, Anyone But You. Katie O'Brien plays an out queer boxer called Lisa Hollowine. Christy talks shit at her in a press conference and then beats her in the ring. And she specifically calls out her sexuality. This is a really horrible thing to do, but we can see that she's projecting. I wish there had been a bit more kind of, you know, nuance in that moment where you could see her saying something and then kind of regretting it in some way, rather than just this facade of just, you know, screw you that she's always kind of hiding behind. It's difficult to sympathize with a self-hating character when you're not seeing that they're hating themselves a lot, that they're actually just hating on other people. Anyway, despite both of those things, Lisa's quiet and sweet, and she actually ends up helping Christy out later when Jim decides that she's a sparring partner, because she's going to be fighting with Layla Ali, daughter of one of the most famous boxers of all time, Muhammad Ali. Now, this is pretty funny, because she ends up going into she obviously is nowhere near Layla Ali's height. There's a good sort of 5 or 6 inches between them. Like, Sydney Sweeney is like a head shorter. And the weight is also an issue because Layla Ali weighs a lot more. And there's quite a funny scene. I assume you're not going to see this film, so I am gonna spoil. You can stop here, and I will spoiler the rest of it. Okay? Are you sitting comfortably? Let the spoilers begin. So, we see Christy dressed up for the weigh-in, wearing camouflage trousers and jacket and giant boots that look like Timberlands, in order to add to the weighing. And previous to her walking into the weighing, we see Jim and her other helpers filling her pockets with coins, but to the point where she walks in and she's just clinking, obviously, which you would think people would call out is like, hey, you've clearly weighed yourself down. But nobody does, and she qualifies just about for the weight. And once again, just to say that, like, her record is really impressive, but of course by this point she's a bit older. She's used to winning and doing what she's doing. She's not necessarily prepared. Lisa Hollowine is, you know, Jim actually brings her in. It's not Christy's idea. But I don't know that Lisa Hollowine is not sure that Christy can beat Layla Ali, because Layla Ali is like a goddamn demon in the ring, and it's just like much bigger and stronger. It just seems like a losing fight going in, but Christy is just so sure of herself all of the time, pretty much, up until she really gets into the ring and is, you know, she's a little bit nervous beforehand, but then once she gets in, she's like, oh god, I've made a huge mistake. I want to talk about very briefly, and one of the reasons I put spoilers on this, and I also want to put some trigger warnings for stuff coming up, is her rise to kind of the Boxing Hall of Fame. You know, she gets signed by Don King and everything's like going really well for her. She gets put on like magazine covers and she gets to go on like Jay Leno and stuff, is contrasted with the sort of horrible decline of whatever was there in her marriage to begin with. So Jim is just a terrible person, as I've mentioned before. He makes her do weird sexual things with other people, some of which seem particularly odd. He films her and takes pictures of her in like sexual poses, which he'll later use against her to blackmail her, and then he'll later send them to people that she knows just to screw with her. In 2003, Christy Martin fights Layla Ali. She loses by a knockout in the 4th round. It's not actually shown on screen. And then in March 2010, Christy Martin reconnects with her high school girlfriend, who we know as Rosie, but that's not her name. And then she tells her husband that she wants a divorce. Now, he has been saying throughout this film, if she leaves him, he will kill her. It's never delivered like a joke. I fully believed him. And on November the 23rd, 2010, according to the Wikipedia, he makes good on that. She she's already like kind of left at this point, but she has come back to like, you know, talk with him and basically tell him that it's over. Christy Martin is stabbed several times violently and shot at least once and left for dead by Jim, who at that point is 66. He ends up going to prison for 2nd-degree attempted murder. The actual scene itself was so shocking and so violent that it was horrible to watch. It was really uncomfortable, and it was kind of unfortunately undercut by the fact that after the multiple stabbings and shootings and stuff, she manages to kind of stand up and walk outside. I'm sure that's really what happened, if that's what's being written about, but it just, you know, it was so violent that you're kind of like, how could anybody survive this? And ironically, after she gets better, she does actually get to call her mum out a little bit, because her mum has been sort of encouraging her staying with Jim the whole time. She's just like a cartoonishly terribly homophobic person. She's basically sort of encourages Christy into marrying Jim in the first place, and then when Christy has tried to sort of tell her throughout the film, like, you know, he's making me do stuff, she's just like, oh, that's where the thing from the trailer comes in. You sound crazy. You know, he tells me you've been doing drugs. Actually, Jim is the one feeding her cocaine. So it's just, you know, her mom is a bitch, and she gets to sort of finally call her out. But who should turn up at the hospital but Lisa Hollowine? And this is kind of cute despite everything that's happened, but Christy Martin ends up actually marrying Lisa Hollowine in 2017, and the film ends with some pictures of them happily together, looking real cute. So I'm glad that she worked through, you know, her internalized homophobia and managed to kind of find happiness in the end. I know that she has suffered quite a lot of like physical, you know, like damage, and has issues with her health and stuff after her boxing career. Presumably being knocked out by Lil Ali didn't help. It probably wouldn't help anybody. But it seems like she's had a pretty tough life. I'm actually kind of interested to read her book. Unfortunately for her, this film has just not done well, and it's, you know, partly due to the fact that it was the Sweeney controversy. It had, and I'm quoting from the Wikipedia here, it had one of the 12 worst openings for a new release that opened on over 2,000 screens. It's considered a bomb. The Wikipedia claims that the film has received mixed to positive reviews. Are the positive reviews in the room with us right now? Because that is not what I have seen. In fact, what I have seen is, though we don't know whether this is true or not, but I have seen screenshots going around from the PR team asking that the film be reviewed a little more softly. I feel bad for Christy Martin that this has happened, because this could have been pretty cool. It was not a good casting. Anyway, I think, like, Sweeney, despite putting on like 20 pounds for this role, just never looks like she has any discernible muscle compared to the other people that she's fighting. I'm not sure that this was really a good idea. I think she thought this might be her Charlize Theron, turn as Eileen Wuornos in Monster, but it just didn't work out that way. So look, I've seen this film so that you don't have to. You probably weren't going to anyway, but I bet you were curious as to what it's about, and now you know.